Hello homies and welcome back to Kayla Simone Home. I am so excited for today's episode. We have been waiting for this for 2 months now. We are finally getting a backsplash installed today. I'm so sick of staring at just this open, empty wall in my kitchen. It's just like, I mean, look at that. It's just thrown off the vibes. It's thrown off the look of the whole thing. So before we can get to the new backsplash getting installed, because I'm honestly not even sure that I told you guys exactly what I decided to do about the backsplash. So let's go back to the beginning. I'm going to show you guys how I removed the backsplash in the first place, how I made the decision, the final decision on what the backsplash was going to be, and then I can show you the install. All right, let's go. So to start from the beginning, when we were first selecting the finishes for the house back at our design appointment, we knew that we really wanted to do a full slab backsplash to match our countertops. We both absolutely love the sleek look of it, the fact that there are no grout lines to clean, not that we even cook that much, but still, you know. So that's what we went into our design appointment kind of expecting to do. And I even made a rendering for us to go off of so that we'd know exactly what the final look of the kitchen would be with our design selections, with our upgrades, and with the DIYs that I planned on doing. Then as we were planning out the kitchen, I kind of noticed that the majority of the kitchens that I kept saving on Pinterest had that same style of backsplash. So we knew that that would be the way to go, but the builder quoted us $6,000 for it. So there was no way that we were gonna pay that on top of the already, I think it was like $14,000 for the countertop and the waterfall island. God, I could literally throw up hearing those prices. Stone, even like fake stone, is expensive. Oh my gosh. So anyway, we had the builders do the countertop and the waterfall island, but we put in the standard 12 by 12 tile backsplash. And then I just started brainstorming on how we could get that full slab look for less. So I saw a few videos on Instagram of people using large format tiles, like big tiles, to create like a similar, almost seamless backsplash look. So that was the route that I planned on going to achieve that like kind of faux full slab backsplash look. So now that you've seen all of my inspo, I'm sure you have figured out that I changed my mind also about the vent hood. Originally, I was going to do a wood vent hood to match the kind of like slat accent detailing that we're gonna do down here on the backside of the island. But the more I looked at it, the more I thought about it, I didn't like having that one wood element in a full white kitchen with no other wood cabinets showing from this direction. I had it in my last house and I liked it in that house. Part of it was just like not wanting to do the same exact thing over again with having the backside of the island match the wood detail on the vent hood. And then the other part of it was I kept seeing these gorgeous slab vent hoods to match the slab style backsplash. And I started to think like, I think that that could look really good in our kitchen. And because the vent hood is such a focal point and the ceilings are so tall, we have 11-foot ceilings and the vent hood is going to go all the way up to the ceiling. I was like, this is really an opportunity to make that more of a statement piece and do something that's a little bit more interesting, a little bit more luxe looking than just simply building a wood box and sticking it up on the wall. So I decided that I want to try something different, and I'm going to do a tiled vent hood, but in the slab style. For the backsplash, I want to use a large format tile to go all the way across the backsplash. And then I also want to use that same tile to do the vent hood all the way up to the ceiling, so that when you're looking at the kitchen, it will just look like all marble here and then marble up to the ceiling. I think that that is going to look really, really good, really, really striking. You guys can see what I mean when I say like the vent hood is such a focal point. So I think that that's gonna look great. And here was my original concept that I came up with for that whole look. But like always, I ran into two problems. So problem number one, I cannot freaking find the tile version of this countertop anywhere. Just, you know, like a black tile that looks like the Nero Marquina, which is what you would call this like black marble look with the big white veining. I thought that that would be a lot easier to find. I did find it at one store online, and I ordered a sample of it, which honestly, I'm like, now why would y'all send me a sample that literally has no white on it? That's stupid. Like, how am I really supposed to see that it matches? But the black matched, and that was really what my big thing was, that I wanted to make sure. Literally the day after the sample arrived, the tile went out of stock, and it has been out of stock since then. And that was like in February. So this whole time I've been kind of like waiting. It doesn't seem like it's ever gonna come back in stock. So I went to Floor & Decor the other day to look at some tile samples, and I noticed, which I actually just noticed in recording this video too, this is really reflective. Like, that is basically a mirror backsplash. I should have known that because our countertop is very reflective. I don't know why, I just wasn't thinking that it would be the same way on the wall, but when I saw them in person, I was like, oh, I actually don't think that I want this dark of a backsplash because of that mirror effect that you guys are seeing right now. So that got me to change my mind and start thinking about potentially doing something else, and this is what I'm pretty sure I'm going with. Even though that's gonna add more white to the kitchen, I think it's actually gonna look really, really good. And I don't honestly dislike the way that it like looks so white over there right now. I just hate that this white is wall instead of cabinet. So I think that that will look very clean, very pretty if I do like kind of a white and gold-ish marble look on the backsplash and on the vent hood. So that solves that issue. And the only thing left to figure out is exactly what I'm going to do about replacing all of the cabinet doors and drawer fronts. And that, my friends, is where the project starts to spiral. If you have ever done any type of home renovation or interior design project, you know that one small change can lead to a bunch of other changes, and that is exactly what happened. I played around with a bunch of different designs. I switched up the color and the placement of the faux marble, and finally I settled on the all white look. I love the way that the white marble blends in with the white cabinets, but still has this kind of like unique element to it. So I ordered some tiles. It was about $1,000 for the tiles and the tile cutter, and it literally was not until they arrived that it dawned on me how huge these things are. Like, I guess I should have known because they're 4x4 and I'm only 5'3". So why I thought that this would be a one person kind of install job, I literally have no clue. Like, delusion to the highest degree. And like, not only was it going to be tricky just to get the tiles installed on the backsplash, but I was also planning on putting them on the vent hood up to 11 feet in the air. Like, no, sis, you really tried it. There was absolutely no way that that could happen. The tiles were so heavy. I just wasn't confident that I would be able to build a structure that was sturdy enough to support all of the weight for itself, let alone adding all of those super heavy tiles on top of it. And the last thing that I would want is the whole thing to just, you know, come tumbling down and like crush me or Ira one day, or like our kids potentially one day after that. So we sent them back. Poor Ira had to carry them all back out of the house, and he's the one that brought them in here the first time by himself because they're just too heavy for me to carry. So we love him for that. But yeah, we were back to the drawing board after that. I realized that I probably could have hired somebody to build the vent hood and install the tiles, but at that point I figured, like, we've already spent $1,000 on the tile and the tile cutter. I feel like if I hired somebody to do the whole vent hood part of it, you're kind of getting back close to the same cost as the original backsplash, like the $6,000 that the builder quoted us, and the whole point of this thing was to save money. So like I said, back to the drawing board, and of course, since we are working with like kind of a strict color palette and design aesthetic of our own imposition, like nobody's keeping us from putting color in the house. This is the color palette that we like, and we're sticking to it. But basically, there just aren't that many color options to choose from, like when you're trying to stay within this modern, organic, very neutral design aesthetic that we're going for. So I decided to just see what my original plan of using the black tiles would look like, even though I knew that they would be too reflective. Literally, even after I saw the tiles in person at the store and was like, this ain't gonna work, I still tried to make it work. But I mean, you guys can see it's like basically a mirror back there. Like maybe if we didn't have the mirrors directly across from the backsplash, then it wouldn't be such a big deal. But yeah, that not gonna work. So we pivoted again. But the thing about pivoting is if you make 3 right turns in a row, you're right back where you started. So that is how we ended up going back to the original plan of the full slab backsplash, the real thing. So this is a remnant piece of our countertop. When they were installing the countertop, we saved this just in case we were going to use it for something. And now I'm kind of thinking we might just have to go back to this.
You'll have the under cabinet lighting to kind of give it some color back. But this is just one small piece with all these other colors reflecting off of it versus a bigger piece that
and it's like
you don't
not
get that
cleaned all the
vibe.
way. Like you can see where the sticker was on it and stuff like that. So maybe if I got some more of the haze off of it.
You don't get the blue from looking at the countertop itself. So like, I think we'll have a little bit more of an element with the lighting, how the light hits it. But I don't think that you'll have to worry about it in the same capacity because it'll be a much larger piece.
Obviously, we still don't know about price, how much it would cost to get the slab installed as a backsplash. We can almost guarantee it's not gonna be $6,000 because $6,000 was the price plus the builder markup. As long as the price is something that we're willing to pay, the question becomes, do we want the backsplash like we originally planned with the wood vent hood, or do we want the white marble look with the white marble vent hood?
I mean, I guess it just depends on what color the wood is.
The wood would be like a white oak to match what's going to go on the back of the island.
Then I think we should go with that. Is that going to go good with the
Go
white
back
cabinet?
to the original plan, you mean? All right, I guess I'll figure out how much this is going to cost. And I was pleasantly surprised when it came back at half the price. Like, how are you literally going to add a 100% markup to something? Like, obviously, I know that builders will add their really little markup to everything that they possibly can, but 100% markup is crazy. Like, that's actually insane. So I am really glad that I did exhaust all of my options before settling or just going with the first plan, because now I know the black tile backsplash just didn't look right. The white tile backsplash just wouldn't really have been worth it since the vent hood part of it was like cost prohibitive. So we'll just save that for the next house one day. And yes, of course, I could have switched to a different backsplash design, like doing normal tiles or like mosaics, but that's just not what we wanted. And I had already put so much time into trying to make this vision come to life that I really didn't want to give up and then spend the rest of our time living here knowing that we settled when we really didn't have to. Got to see it through, my boy. So the first step of prepping for a slab backsplash is to remove the existing backsplash. I started by cutting the power and removing the outlet covers, and then used a blade to cut through any caulking that were around the edges of the tile where it meets the walls, cabinets, countertop. And then I used a hammer and just went at it, basically. The hammer and pulling it with my hands seemed to work the best. And the trim puller didn't really help me as much since the tiles are so rigid. So I mainly just tried to break off all of the tiles, and then I was able to rip the drywall into pieces. And I know that some people really love demo days, but honestly, they're not my favorite. It's not that demo is hard, but it does take a lot of muscle to like knock out all the tiles and then rip off the drywall. And I was just so tired the next day. It probably would have been easier for me to cut around all of the edges with a multi-tool first and then remove the wall in big chunks. So you could try that, but if you do, you want to be sure that there isn't anything behind the wall that could potentially be damaged. So We have photos of what's inside every single wall in our house. It's something that I definitely recommend doing if you're building a home, so that you can see where the wires are, where the gas lines are. I didn't really have to worry too much about the wiring, but I really did not want to accidentally hit the gas pipe. So I just avoided smashing that area, and then I came back and pulled it off with my hands. There was a huge mess to clean up afterwards, of course, but that's pretty much all that it takes to remove a backsplash. I went back and cleaned up all of the extra little pieces of drywall that were kind of like stuck on there as much as I could, so that they wouldn't interfere with installing the new backsplash. And then I started working on removing the vent hood, but we will talk about the vent hood more in my next video. My last piece of advice is really just make sure that you remove all of the drywall, especially around the edges and the corners. I know that I kind of touched on that a second ago, but like, you really want your slab to sit nice and flush to the wall. I did not do a great job of cleaning up all around the edges, but luckily the the countertop company that I hired to come do the backsplash, they were able to go in with their multi-tool and just trim off those extra little pieces. And then they also had to remove our cooktop temporarily so that they could put that backsplash in for me. Morning, homies. So it is a new day. I worked on this outlet yesterday, trying to get it changed to be like the strip underneath the cabinets, and I figured out I'm just not gonna be able to do that myself. I'm definitely going to need to hire an electrician to do that for me, because all of the tutorials and all of the like kind of reviews that I read showed that you need just one set of wires going into it, and I obviously have two. And I thought that I could figure out how to do it, but at a certain point, I've honestly just started to realize, like, why am I going to waste my time trying to figure out how to do this when I can't find an example of someone else having done it, and I really don't know what I'm doing? Why am I going to waste so much time trying to make that work and then possibly do it wrong when I could, and then still have to hire somebody, when I could just go ahead, call it quits right here, and hire somebody to do it? So I'm going to actually have somebody come in and do the plug mold outlets for me, and probably change this outlet out to be like the other outlet that I want. And I do have some other things that I want done around the house. So there's just multiple things around here that I could really use an electrician to do, and I was planning on hiring him to do all those things anyway. So I'm just gonna add this to the list, and I'm gonna bump it up on my list so that we get an electrician sooner rather than later. So just as a little refresher of where we started to how we've been living for the past 2 months, and now finally here is the finished backsplash. I am so in love with how this turned out, you guys. The main thing was that we did not want any outlets visible in the backsplash, and that's one of the main reasons why, I mean, aside from the price, that I am really glad that we hired this out after the fact instead of going with the builder, because the builder would not have done like these outlets up top here. They would have just given us the like basic tacky white outlets all across the full slab, and like that honestly defeats the purpose of having a full slab backsplash when you're gonna have eyesores in it. We did end up leaving just this one outlet. I still need to like swap this one out for a black one, but we left this because this is where our Google Home gets plugged in. This just kind of like slides right there, covers it all the time. There's other stuff that goes on the countertop, but then you look at it and it doesn't even look like we have outlets at all. We're not the type of people that like really keep a bunch of stuff on the countertop that needs to be plugged in. We do functional decor, so like these types of things here, like food items, things that you use for cooking, but like other than this is our air fryer here slash toaster oven. So we did leave an outlet back there for that to be able to be plugged in. I'll swap that one out for a black one also, but we don't keep anything else plugged in on the countertop all the time. I feel like one of the most common complaints that I see about slab backsplashes, or really more so about like the hidden outlets up here, because you can do this even if you don't have a slab backsplash. So one of the biggest complaints that I see, not usually from people that have it, but you know, from trolls on the internet, saying that it's impractical, that like who wants to see, you know, the ugly cords like hanging down all the time, because this is what it's going to look like when things are plugged in and actually in use. Really doesn't bother us because this is only going to be plugged in for as long as it takes to actually use the thing. But if you are somebody that keeps lots of stuff plugged in on your countertop, then this probably is not the best solution for you. And then as you can see, I also went through and added our Philips Hue light strips as under cabinet lighting. I ran the cord through the cabinet there, and then it's plugged in here next to the vent hood. And then I also had the electricians add an additional outlet up there for this light strip and for one of the lower ones. And then we also had them add another outlet up here so that once I build those like faux stacked cabinets, those will have their own lights up there and then down below as well. And then the electricians did remove this light here that was above the sink, but not like centered with the vent hood. It was just kind of weird, and it wasn't connected to any of the other can lights. So they removed that. I had them leave the two pendants because I actually found a new option for pendants that I really like that are still linear, but double. So we're gonna try that out. When they remove that light, that's what left me with this hole in the wall that I'll have to patch. And we just moved that light switch inside the pantry, but the motion sensor switches were out of stock at the time. So I'll have to go back and swap that one out. And then one of the last things that I had the electricians do was add this power strip similar to what we have underneath the cabinets, but this one will actually be mounted underneath our island here. You guys probably saw this in my last video about the island. It was the front side of the island. So eventually we'll come back to this and work on the back side of the island. But basically when our house was being built, like literally the week that they were supposed to be doing the electrical, the National Electrical Code changed and said that you could no longer have outlets on your island that are meant to serve the countertop. So like, you know, typically in a house you would see like an outlet on either end of the island. Well, that is no longer code in America anymore, because they were finding that, you know, people would put their crock pot on the countertop and little kids would come by and they'd pull the cord, crock pot comes down on top of them. So they had to, I guess, they don't do that anymore. But the code did require them to leave an open junction box in here. So I don't know if that was like purposefully. So it was like, here you go. We're not going to let you have outlets, but we'll make it easy for you to add one. But so that's where we pulled the power from to be able to wire this new plug mold. The only other option would have been for our builder to install a pop-up outlet in the surface of the countertop. We don't have that kind of builder. They weren't trying to do all that. That was not an option. And in fact, none of the electrical things that we paid to do after the fact with the electricians, none of those would have been offered through our builder. So I am glad that we were able to do it after the fact, and it was actually cheaper than what it would have been if our builder would have offered it. So that's nice. And actually, let's chat about hiring things out real quick, because I feel like that doesn't really get talked about a lot on DIY channels, but I have a couple tips for you. So for all of those things, plus installing the smart switches, the total cost for the electrical work came out to $2,885. I actually got quotes from 4 different electricians, and not only was this pretty close to the best price out of all of them, but In Charge is actually who did all of the wiring in our house originally, so it really just made sense to use them again. One of the electricians that gave me a quote did mention that it is super important to use an electrical company that is licensed with insurance, because if anything goes wrong and, like, God forbid, were to start a house fire, your homeowner's insurance apparently, according to them, would most likely cover it if it was something you did yourself, or if it was a company at fault, then their insurance would pay. But if you just like hired a handyman, somebody that doesn't have their own like business insurance, well, guess who's paying for those damages out of pocket? You are. So I had no idea about that, and I had honestly never really thought much about it. So that definitely opened my eyes to the importance of doing your due diligence before you hire just anybody to come do work on your home. InCharge did a really, really great job on everything, and they finished in a single day, which is always nice. So I'm definitely going to continue to use them in the future when we get other electrical work done around the house. I do some electrical things myself, but like I mentioned a few videos ago, I'm really starting to be just a little bit more mindful about how I'm spending my time versus my money, and letting myself off the hook from feeling like I have to do every single part of the project myself. So electrical is one of those things that made sense to let go of and just pay and have a professional do it, so that I knew it would be done correctly and safely while I focus on other aspects of the project. And then obviously we had the backsplash professionally installed as well. I don't think that there is a way to install your own slab backsplash, to be honest, but if you know of one, let me know in the comments. But you guys saw how many DIY options I considered before going this route, and just for the look we wanted and for the total price, it ended up being worth it to us to just go ahead and get the real thing. For the backsplash, I got multiple quotes again. I read a bunch of reviews, and I ended up going with True Blue Surfaces because their quote came in the lowest by far. Normally, I wouldn't recommend going with the lowest quote in other scenarios like landscaping, or maybe if you were getting custom built-ins made, because sometimes that's like more of a tactic to get you to hire that person, and then once they're hired, they will just like keep increasing the price until it's back at what they should have quoted you in the first place. So it's like a little bit of a bait and switch, or it could mean that they aren't really that good at their job and they don't know how to price things, or they are intentionally planning on cutting corners. Do with that information what you will. It's not always the best thing to hire the cheapest person that you can find. But with this specific scenario, the fact that the majority of the price was determined by the cost of the slab itself, when I looked at all of the quotes, the labor cost was about the same across the board. It was really just the material that ended up being different. So I don't know, maybe True Blue was just able to work out like a better deal with Silestone, and they were able to get the quartz for cheaper than other companies can. That's my best guess. True Blue really did a great job on the entire fabricating and install process. The only part that I am kind of bummed about is the seam, and maybe it's just me being super type A. Maybe it's because my eyes know exactly where to look, but my eyes are drawn to the seam every time I look at the backsplash. I think it's probably just the nature of it being directly across from so many windows. There's a ton of light shining on it all day long. And so just right where that seam is, the light kind of hits it at two different angles. I don't know, hopefully you guys can tell what I'm talking about, because they did a great job on the seam itself, except for the veining part. I feel like that could have lined up a little bit better. They do make you sign something that tells you that like the veining might not be perfect, but in the picture that they sent me to sign off of, it did look perfect. So I don't know exactly what happened there or why it's not like lined up perfectly. And I also kind of wonder, like, maybe if we had had a white backsplash, maybe the seam wouldn't be as noticeable. But we do like to keep a few functional decor pieces on the countertop anyway, so that's nothing a little cutting board moment can't cover up. I am still swapping some things out and potentially replacing some of these pieces with things that, I don't know, maybe just work a little bit better. And you can see I've started decorating a little bit for fall. So yeah, this might change a little bit, but I will link everything that I can for you in the description. It is finally starting to look like a real kitchen again in here. Even though it was still functional without the backsplash, there's just something about having a gaping hole in the wall and that being the first thing that you see every single time you like wake up in the morning and come out into the kitchen, like that being the thing that greets you, not my jam. So I'm really happy to finally have a backsplash again, and I'm beyond happy with how it turned out. I'm so glad that it looks just as good as the rendering. It's funny how I made so many changes only to end up back at what I thought I wanted all along. So all's well that ends well, I guess. And now that that's done, it is time to focus on the vent hood, which I will admit I have been kind of avoiding the past couple weeks because, like the backsplash, I have gone back and forth on the design so many times, and I was getting to a point where I was just starting to second guess every single choice that I made. So obviously we are not doing the large format tile. We're not doing the slab to match the backsplash. So I think I'm like 99% sure that I'm just gonna go back to my original design plan and do a white oak vent hood. Because of the other things that I've considered, I don't really like the look of a plain black vent hood. Ours is so skinny. It's only 30 inches wide and it's pretty tall. So it just kind of looks like a chimney. There was already too much white. So I didn't want to do anything that was just gonna be like plain white. Not a fan of like shiplap or beadboard or any of those things. Remember, like, we're going very modern, very sleek. So that's basically what I'm trying to stick with. I don't want to do anything that's like super small tiles because, again, like, we just went through all of this to get the slab backsplash. So like, I don't really want to introduce small tiles like here. So it doesn't really leave me with very many options. I did briefly consider plaster or like a micro cement, but I don't think that those really match the look that they were going for either. It's either like a little bit too traditional or a little bit too industrial. But with me at this point, honestly, you never know. You really never know. So I guess you're just gonna have to wait until the next video to find out what I do. So let me know in the comments what you think would look the best, and maybe I will mock some of those up as renderings and feature it in the next video so that we can look at it together and discuss why it may or may not work for me and why it may or may not work for you. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss the next video. And if you need to catch up on anything that's happened with this project so far, because even though it might not look like it, has been quite a bit. So if you need to catch up, I will link the playlist for you in just a sec. There's a ton of great tips in there that you can use on your own DIY kitchen renovation, whether you're doing like a full remodel or just making some small updates. So go check that out, and I will see you guys next week. Bye, homies.